Topic is hacking compliance. All right, I'm going to start with you, Heather. Heather, give me some good advice on dealing with compliance.
Be proactive. Don't wait till the auditor shows up. Make sure you conduct your readiness way before they get there.
All right, Christina, go the other way. Give me some bad advice on dealing with compliance.
Don't bother the business or the technical teams. Just have the security team do all the work, and they should know. They should answer all the questions themselves.
Now one up that one, Heather. Give me some worse advice.
Oh, goodness. I'll try. Just write the policies so that you can show the auditor that you have them, but don't worry about implementing them.
Get ready. It's Super Cyber Friday.
I like it. All right. Welcome, everybody, to Super Cyber Friday. Why is my little thing working? I thought it would work. It's not. Well, today's topic is hacking compliance, an hour of critical thinking of how to simplify and scale complicated and often manual processes. Our guests today are the two people I was just chatting with, Christina Shannon, who's a global CISO over at Catalina USA, and also Dr. Heather Bucher, global CTO of 6Clicks. And by the way, I want to mention that Heather is on PTO, but she wanted to come and join here. So thank you very much, Heather, for breaking your PTO to join us here for today's Super Cyber Friday. Our sponsor today is 6Clicks. Thank you so much, 6Clicks, for sponsoring today's episode. Hey, lots of ways to participate. For those of you who are regulars, of which I see many of them, you know this. There's the chat room, which you're active in. Today's best bad idea, here's what I want. I want what not to say to an auditor. What should you not say during an audit or to an auditor? All right. 3, submit. How do we make it 10% better? And vote in the polls, or you can join us on video at any time with asking a bring me on. Aaron, our producer, will try to bring on as many as you possible. Also, at the very bottom of the screen, you see the words ask a question. You can ask a question anytime or vote for your favorite question. Feel free to get your questions in now. All right. You just saw it. Good advice, bad advice, worse advice. Today's schedule. What not to do during, or what not to say during an audit, and how do we make it 10% better? Get those in now. Remember, bad idea, or write 10% so we know it's good advice or bad advice. Sometimes we can't tell, and you need to do that. Please get some good advice in early, too, and now don't make me berate you to get good advice. We will play the public interest. We will put up the poll live of what not to say during an audit. Then we will play That Totally Sucks. We'll play the Department of Yes. We'll put a poll live, and then the 2 worst idea contenders face off. Those people, please make sure you got audio and video ready. And then we'll have last question and final advice. And then we will do our meetup, which if you have not been to it, stick around. It's a ton of fun. Hey, next Friday, guess what? We're doing another one of these. Hacking third-party integrations, an hour. That date's right. An hour of critical thinking about securing apps that talk to other apps. And guess what? There's a link right there at the bottom of the screen where you can register for next week's event while still being in this week's event. So click that at any time. And I want to mention the reason you want to register now, because if you do it by 5 p.m. before next Tuesday, or 5 p.m. on Tuesday, you're automatically entered in raffle to win a CISO Series jacket. And I keep forgetting to mention that people do actually win these, but I don't announce the winners. So I'm going to start announcing them. Peter Zwers of Murado Intelligence won this week's jacket. Thank you, Peter. Peter, if you're here, speak up in the chat. We'd love to see that. And by the way, when you get your jacket, make sure you take a photo of it in the old social media. All right, enough of my preamble. You've heard enough of me right now. Let's get to the topic at hand, which is compliance. Get your questions in. Here's my first question. I will start with you, Heather. Let's just start. We're going to start broad and narrow in. And broad, I'm going to just say, give me the big issue. What is the most troublesome aspect of compliance? What part is just constantly getting ahead of us that we can't deal with, or most of us are having trouble dealing with?
Sure. I think it's managing multiple compliance regs, or trying to figure out how to eat the elephant, right? And when you're an organization budding in your compliance program, it can be really overwhelming. So it's, laying the foundation, trying to figure out where to start. And then once you start, it kind of feels like overwhelming, right? They just keep coming and coming and coming. And once you get through one audit, here comes the next one. So I think it's just managing your internal expectations, getting the house in order, and building that really robust foundation so that when things do start coming down the pipe more and more, and you start pursuing other regulations, it's easier and more streamlined because you have that solid foundation.
It does seem like consuming an elephant. All right, Christina, what do you think is the big hullabaloo or the big part? And is it the same thing what Heather just said, or do you believe it's something different?
Well, I think Heather touched on the process efficiency or lack thereof. And I would probably put a little bit different perspective in the sense of like what's troublesome for me like is when compliance equals your security strategy. If it's 100% of your security strategy, then I think we have some work to do.
Yes. And by the way, we've heard this for years that compliance does not equal security. But what is less said, and is also true, security does not equal compliance either. It doesn't go the other way. So it's a non-transitive property, if you will.
Yeah, it enables a foundation.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. So let's get to how does meeting one compliance, Heather, help with achieving compliance with other frameworks, industry relations, and company security standards? So compliance is not just whatever it is to avoid getting fined. By
Right.
the way, I was recently fined for violating something compliant. Not a big fine, a small one, but it was just pure ignorance. And I'm sure that happens a lot, that it's just pure ignorance or you miss something. You're not actively doing things. Like, isn't that half the problem? Just missing things, Heather?
It is. And I think the kind of butt of the issue is that organizations don't understand how much these regulations overlap with one another, right? They're saying the same thing. They're just saying it differently because someone else is regulating it. And that could be across industry. It could be globally, right? What we say here in the US doesn't directly translate to what they say in the UK, but we're all saying the same thing and we can all implement it in the same way. So it's really important, in my opinion, to pick a framework that can not satisfy the masses, but give you a good breadth of security and compliance efforts so that it's just a rinse and repeat and it's not a do-over every single time. Because if you don't take these things into consideration, the next time your regulation changes, or if you have a new regulation that comes down, you're going to have to rethink everything you just completed for that one audit. So it's just understanding the overlap and understanding how to translate all of these words that are saying the same thing just a little bit differently.
Don't want to keep recreating the wheel. Christina, you were nodding your head heavily on that. Add.
I was just going to say, I would you can map controls from one standard to the other, right? So if you think about NIST, you're identifying, you're protecting, you're detecting, you're responding, recover, right? Those map nicely to ISOs. Like Heather said, the only difference is they're different labels, right? Or for the categories, or different terminology, but meaning the same thing.
Yeah.
This, by the way, you see this bleeding in everything, and there's always this point where we say, can't one person come up with one form that we all agree to? This, my wife will complain about all the summer camp forms she had to fill out for the multiple number of summer camps. Like, hey, can I just fill out one and you guys all look at it? But no, they all had to do that. So it just seems like an endless amount of busy work. Yes, Heather? Like that's where it just wears you down. It's
resourcing, right? And then you have to start talking about resourcing constraints and the toll that takes on compliance programs or lack thereof. For me, that starts bleeding over into being reactive as opposed to proactive. And as soon as security professionals, as soon as we sit back on our heels, that's when we're doomed for failure. And the same goes with compliance. If you sit back and react to issues instead of being proactive about them, you're doomed for failure at that point.
Christina, what is an audit? Just let me actually phrase it this way. Describe a good experience with an audit.
Have you had one of those?
Well, I've had enough audits where at least one of them, or one or two, has been good. No.
Like for me, going to the dentist, a good experience is absolutely nothing happens. I would think you'd want something similar in an audit. Yes?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think a good experience in an audit is when you do the kickoff, right? Just to let people know, here's what's happening. Here's who's needed. I've seen so many times where auditors just come straight in and they're asking questions and they're asking for evidence. And then that's a surefire way to make people upset with you really fast. And then they don't know why they're doing it. So it frustrates them more. So I think, a really great way is to do that kickoff meeting, make sure everybody knows why. And then I've had audits when they do that, they go so much better and so much smoother, and everybody owns it more.
So the kickoff meeting and that's a kickoff meeting before the audit with the auditor, sort of sets the groundwork and eases before the actual audit. Yes.
With the stakeholders, right? Like, so not all the stakeholders, right? Because you'll have tons that you need to go to in big companies, but the major stakeholders that need to support for their individual department should be in that meeting. So you have sponsorship and you have support for what you're doing. Everybody knows that this is important to the company, and they should make time for it. Because I think the timing, that goes back to the time, the resource, and priority. If you do the planning part, it goes all projects, including audits, go over so much smoother. And I'd say I've been in some companies where they do that really well.
What has been the smoothing out process for you, Heather? What have you found?
I think it's all of the folks that aren't involved every single day, but are still involved in the process, in the audit in some way. So not surprising them, right? Maybe compliance isn't something that they think about every single day, but they do it by second nature of their job or how they're operating, et cetera. It's those kind of folks that you have to get on board with the audit process, because they're the ones, to Christina's point, that need to be kind of prepped. And here's the groundwork. This is why we're doing it. This is what it's going to look like, because they don't live this life every day. So the non-security professionals that are very much involved with security are the ones that you have to smooth it out with and lay that critical foundation with.
By the way, I just want to give kudos to all the bad ideas that I see coming in.
There's a lot of good ones.
There's some bribing that happens. There's some
few low-level threats.
There's some insulting that goes on. These are all excellent, by the way. I'm just warning you, both of you are going to actually have to, whichever one gets voted up the most, have to adopt it in our Department of Yes game. So get ready for that challenge. That's always a treat. By the way, if you have not voted if you have not registered for next week's Super Cyber Friday on third-party integrations, go ahead, click that link at the bottom. It won't take you out of this Super Cyber Friday chat, and we'll continue on. All right, we're going to be playing our next game in 2.5 minutes, but I got more questions. All right, I do want to talk about all the sort of different things that you have to comply with and the overlapping. I want to get in like a layer or two deep. And I know this is kind of, Heather, I want you to sort of take the helm on this one, because this is kind of correct me if I'm wrong, this is kind of 6Clicks' special sauce of helping you deal with less of the busy work, in that while it's not an industry standard, you've kind of done your best in terms of following these things. So like what my wife discovered, was describing in the "Couldn't you all have the same darn camp" form, you're sort of doing that to some certain level. Explain.
Right. Yeah. So we're using artificial intelligence to map regulations onto one another to develop cross-compliance. We do this with industry standards. A lot of organizations may have their own common control framework that they have built in-house with their own SMEs, and they want to map those onto other regs. We use artificial intelligence to automate that entire process. Now, I know some people in the audience are thinking, well, there's the UCF and the SCF and all of these other frameworks that do the same thing. Well, they do, but they don't. It's a little bit different, because we can take proprietary standards, and we can take different flavors of things, because we're using machine learning and language processing to determine the matches. We're not just using teams of people. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's kind of a next level to that. And it's an automation opportunity with that. But that means that it's an assess once and apply to many opportunity, right? So you can take your own internal common control framework that maps nicely onto HIPAA and NIST and ISO, or whatever the frameworks are in question. You can assess your posture against that one framework, and we can show you compliance to many. So instead of collecting evidence 10 different times for your 10 different audits throughout the year, you can collect it once and show proof across your whole audit posture, essentially.
Awesome. We have a game.
Do you know what others are thinking? On the public interest.
All right, this is a good game for you and our audience. And by the way, your success in this game will determine how well or how you're going to play our That Totally Socks game. Here we go. Pretty simple. Audience, you can play along as well. Most average monthly search queries For A, compliance, B, regulation. What do you think it is? What gets more? Christina?
Compliance.
Regulation.
Compliance? I'm sorry. So Christina's saying regulation. Heather's saying compliance. All right. Let's see what the correct answer is. It is compliance. All right. So 1 for Heather. Good job. All right. Next one. Here's a good one. Which gets more, ISO 27001 or high trust?
I'd say ISO.
Yeah. ISO for certain.
For certain? No,
Oh,
not for
no.
certain.
That's really surprising.
I will tell you that I was surprised by that as well. I did not expect that to be as popular. All right. Everyone also thought it was ISO 27001. All right. Security policy versus security rule. What do you think?
Security policy.
Likewise, policy.
Security policy. You are both correct. Good job on that one. All right. So we have 2 for Heather and 1 for Christina. And last one, third-party risk or vendor risk management.
I'm going to go with third-party risk.
Me too.
Third-party risk is, vendor risk
Dang
management. So 2-1, very good. Good job. Now, first of all, I don't think anyone got 4 because I think everyone got stumped on that at high trust ISO 27001. I was shocked by that as well. I totally thought that was in a lock, like you said, Heather, but wrong. All right, so this will determine how you do in our next game. So hang tight for that as well. Just a second. That means, by the way, you are going to, Christina, you're going to need to pick 5 items in the that Totally Socks game, and you will have to pick 4, Heather, but we'll get to that in a moment. All right, let us move on to, are we at 20 minutes past the hour? Oh, not yet. No, you got 3 more minutes to get your bad ideas, which is what not to say to an auditor. Guess what? We got some questions that have come in, and they're good. Kerwin asked this question: is mapping of one compliance framework to another better than one compliance framework to risk categories? I'll start with you, Christina. What do you think?
Now, the question was, is it better than mapping one compliance framework
to another? So okay. Kind of essentially what essentially, correct me if I'm wrong, Heather, this is what 6 Clicks does. You're kind of mapping them on top of each other. Is it better to do that or to map a compliance framework to a risk category?
Well, I think that it depends on what you're trying to do, because I think when you're mapping a compliance framework to a risk category, at that point, you're looking at, are you addressing the risk that matters to your company? That's what I would think that you're doing at that point. And so I think you do both. I don't know if there's both. Yeah, but I would say mapping it to the risk to me is more strategic. So
right, and that's when you are actually building in your security plan at that point.
Absolutely, yeah.
And you're also seeing how the value of your compliance and it can actually apply to your security.
Yes, I agree with that completely.
I agree with you. All right, what do you think? I mean, do you have anything to add to more? I'm assuming you're going to agree with us here on this.
I do. I think the only thing I would add is mapping to your risk domains would take you to another level of maturity that's past compliance, because now we're talking about risk and how your compliance posture impacts your risk appetite and your tolerance and things like that. So that's a whole other level of maturity that organizations have a hard time getting to, if I'm allowed to say that.
You're very much allowed to say that. Hey, this is a question that Yodi has. I'll ask you this one, Christina, first. When an audit uncovers significant / material risk that was not known before, do you consider that a good audit day? What do you think?
Yes, I consider that a great audit day. I want to know about those things, right? Because then you can't protect what you don't know about in terms of risk. Yes,
and you agree, Heather? You're nodding your head?
100%, yeah.
That's a good idea. All right, here's another good question that came in from Ahmad Abbasi. Ahmad, I think you're new. We haven't seen you here. Thank you. Welcome. Ahmad Abbasi asks, how can a penetration tester or ethical hacker actually be part of the compliance process? What do you think, Heather?
You got to know where your vulnerabilities are. You got to know what's going on in your systems, right? If you have somebody internal doing that for you, that's better than being external.
That is good advice. And by the way, Sean Bowen, I think, has the best 10% better tip here. Work for a company that has no compliance requirements. which I think the moment you form a company, you have compliance requirements. Yes, is that the idea, Christina?
Typically, I mean, unless the CEO has the highest risk tolerance in the universe, I guess.
That's a good question. What's the highest? What kind of high risk tolerance? Because I can assume no CEO's got a high risk tolerance, but how high can it get?
I don't know. I spent some time in manufacturing, and that's kind of scary.
Yeah, that's not high.
I mean, I think that it really is looking at, have you looked at as an organization what you care about? Like, have you identified what you care about? And do you know that you're addressing the risk with those things if something was to happen to them? That's how I would go about it.
All right. Before I'm going to toss to you in a second, Heather, but if you've not put up, I'm sorry, our poll is about to go up. Go ahead, Aaron, put up our poll. That's going to be the best bad ideas, what not to say to an auditor. Please vote in that, because we're going to play our game in just a few minutes of the Department of Yes.
Oh,
go ahead. Yes, Christina.
I was just going to say on that pen test question, that was the one I wanted to jump in on that.
Oh,
because
I'm sorry.
I think that Heather highlighted something that I really wasn't considering, but I think that the pen tester could definitely be strategic in that sense, where they're identifying gaps that you wouldn't necessarily find from like a Q&A type process.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that was a good call out. And then the second thing I thought was like the pen testers, I think, where the risk quantification comes in too. And then that's where you're evolving and you're maturing too, because now you've answered a set of controls and you're figuring out, is that enough to keep the bad guys out? So
our poll is up, everybody. There are a lot of bad things to say, and they're pretty darn funny. So please vote. All of you vote. I know how many there are of you there, so please, all of you vote. All right, let's get back to questions, and we're going to be playing another game in just 3 minutes, but I got a couple more questions. All right. The thing with compliance is it's constantly changing, and the average human does not know what's constantly changing. How do you deal with just constant changes, Heather?
Oh, man. Now that's a loaded question a little bit, because you have to know that they've changed before you can deal with it, right? And so I think it's staying abreast of changes through feeds, through, staying up to date as you can, and then gap analysis. Where are the deltas? What actually changed? Does it apply to us? Is it in scope? And it has to be a very well thought out, meticulous process that never ends. It's a never ending cycle. It can't be we're going to check it, once every 6 months, because regulations change sometimes much more often than that, even in the slightest way, especially when you're juggling many regulations. So it's quite a challenge that you have to process, and you have to cycle through all the time. It has to always be living. It can't be something that you just do every now and again because it seems like it's time.
Christina, how are you dealing with the constant pressure and keeping up?
I'd say a combination of what Heather said, which is, threat intelligence feeds, sources, communities. I would also say there's some good compliance software out there that will, like, for example, in the privacy space, there's some good compliance software that we use that updates whenever the regulations update. So
I know 6 Clicks has something in this area. Yes.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we integrate the content in the platform so that when the content changes, everyone's notified in the platform and they can deal with the change directly in the GRC software.
So that was going to be my question. So can you just sort of visually describe like what happens in terms of with 6 Clicks in terms of how you're alerting people, and how, like, if I go into the program, I can see visually what's changed and what needs to be addressed?
Yeah, so our integrated content library lives in the platform, in-app, and ISO is a good example. ISO 27001 is a great example, even though apparently it's not as popular as High Trust. But 27001 and 2 are changing this year for the first time in near a decade. 27002 has already changed. 27001 will change, by fall, I think October. Mm-hmm. Anytime a change like that happens, our clients get alerted in-app. Hey, by the way, there's been a major version change on ISO or PCI or whatever the case may be. And Haley can map and find the deltas between those changes. Haley being the artificial intelligence engine that we use to map between the regs. And once you identify those changes, some of the nomenclature change won't matter. right? And that's where the mapping comes into play, because again, it's saying the same thing, just slightly differently, but it can still be interpreted and implemented in your environment the same way. So there's no action to be taken. Whereas there are going to be deltas and gaps in the new reg, or maybe it's changed around or what have you. So the system or the software will identify where those gaps and modifications are so that they can be actioned on appropriately in your environment.
Excellent. All right, we got another game. Here we go. All right. Oh, let me get the music.
Oh no, that totally sucks.
All right. If I remember correctly, blue is your color, right, Christina?
Yes.
I'm going to have you go first. You have to pick 5. Heather is picking 4. Again, of these 12 items here, 11 stink at varying degrees. 1 is good. Hope you pick the good one. And the not so bad stinks one. Go ahead, pick a number 1 through 12.
7.
Number 7. You're breached, but you announced immediately with regular updates. Okay, so not awful, not awful. All right, you're blue. Go ahead, Heather, pick a number.
I'm going to go with 4.
All right, number 4. Your data has been poisoned and you don't know if you've got good backups. Ooh, that is not good. I'm going to actually, whoops, here. I have to color you red here. Whoops. This happened before. I have to, hold on. I'm going to get you back in here. Hold on. We do this. This has happened before to us. Get you back in. Whoops. There we go. Okay, so we had 7 and we had 4. All right. Pick another one, Christina.
3.
3. You pay off an attacker $100,000 to not reveal the 50 million accounts that were just hacked. By the way, some of this have come from real life situations. All right, not good. There, Christina. Heather, you pick.
I'm going to go with 12.
Number 12. Here we go. Your CEO is having an affair with your auditor. Not good. That could have been a bad idea here.
Maybe it depends on who you ask. I don't know.
There you go. That's true. Christina.
Number 2.
Number 2. You fail to notify the public of a breach weeks after it's discovered. Oh, we've heard that story before. Not good. Heather, you go ahead. Choose.
10, please.
Number 10. The public thinks you were wrongly accused and raised money to pay your fine. You got the good one. There you go.
Yay.
Good job. All right, Christina.
Number 1. I'll keep that row.
All right, you're gonna close out the row. Your point of sale systems are linked to other systems that are not PCI compliant. Not so good. Not so good. All right, one more for you, Heather.
6, please.
Number 6. Okay. You've never seen these auditors before. Just something that's, sometimes it's good to have a relationship with an auditor. All right. You need to pick one more, though, Christina.
11.
11. Let's see what you get. 3 months of PCI non-compliance results in a $10,000 a month fine. All right. All right. So please put up the poll, Aaron. Blue is Christina. Red is Heather. I'm going to give exactly 30 seconds to vote here. And what you have to do, audience, to determine whose situation is worse. So it is Christina with the blue or Heather with the red. Remember that Heather does have a couple of bad ones here. The 2 worst ones, I would say, your data has been poisoned and you don't know if you've got good backups. That's pretty bad. And your CEO is having an affair with your auditor. Also not so good. But you were wrongly accused of public and they raised money to pay your fine, which is good. Although, Christina, you are loaded with bad things here.
I know.
It's pretty bad. All right. So let's see. I'm giving 10 more seconds for the audience to vote here. You have to actually scroll to the bottom. Heather, you are definitely why is Heather winning here? I think people are missing the point of this. You're supposed to vote for who's got it worse. Christina, I'm now voting for you, Christina, because you definitely have it worse. People I think, are finally figuring out how this game works. But why is Heather with the red is winning? I think it's because your data's been pointing and you don't know if you got good backups. That's what they don't
Are you
like.
sure
But
it's not because the CEO is sleeping with the auditor?
That could be it,
People
too.
don't like that. Their ethics is just going
all right.
on.
Well, hold on. Christina, now. Oh, Jesus, it's going back and forth now. Oh, no, Christina, you're pulling away. All right, I'm going to give 5-second countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Christina, you win 13-8. There you go.
You can have that win, Christina. I'll let you have that one.
Again, I don't know if it's a win per se.
I like
But there
it.
you go. Good job for both of you. And we are actually up to our next game. But you know what? Let me ask one more question before we go into our next game. This comes from Matthew Bybee, who is a CISO himself over at SATCOM Direct. What are some practical steps for creating a compliance program in an SMB? Can you start with that one, Christina?
So in a small, medium-sized business, chances are you're not going to have a lot of compliance like thou shouts or mandates. So a lot of
I am definitely in the small department, and I just got a little violation myself. So it can happen.
It definitely can happen. Just mean sometimes, typically in a smaller environment, you might not be processing credit cards. You're probably private over public, so you might not have a lot of the traditional mandates that a bigger private or bigger public company would have. So really what I would do there is I would look at, well, what are the compliance mandates? What do you need to do for your business, your industry? And then map like basically your budget and your technology or your budget and your options to that. Because you might, in those environments, you're really not getting, the $30 million security budget. You might get $1 million or something. And so you're really looking at what's the top things I got to address. And then you're really looking, I think, more on the risk side to address those than you're really working in the compliance world in those environments.
All right. Good advice. What would you add to that, Heather? And do you agree, by the way?
I do agree. I would say that if you really are gung-ho, though, about building a compliance program or a more generalized GRC program, it's really important to pick a framework like a NIST CSF or something similar that is easy to digest and still gives you a foundation to build on. But to Christina's point, it's 100%. It's a lot closer. I won't say 100%, but it is definitely a lot closer to managing your risk appetite and your risk tolerance than it is compliance if you're not being mandated by regulators or auditors.
Okay.
And I will tell you that the first half of my career, I spent in heavily regulated places, and I was one of those people that loathed compliance. I was the team that was like, "Don't give us more, come on." And then the last 10 years, as you go up the ladder, right, you find yourself in smaller, medium-sized businesses, and I would say that that's where you wish you have compliance.
Yeah, exactly. Gives you something to strive for. Compliance is more than just compliance. It can help you build a whole program.
Well, it gives you that foundation, right? And then you can just keep building on that.
Exactly.
So, I've come full circle on my opinion.
I'm sorry. Carlotta is coming to the stage right now. I was just about to play a new game, but Carlotta is coming. All right, we got a question.
Carlotta, you are wrong.
Carlotta, I'm sorry.
SMBs are very much looking for compliance, but they're looking for it as a sales enablement. 90% of my clients, we have about 35, 40 clients across fractional CISO. 90% of them are coming for ISO or SOC 2 or a HIPAA adjacent, high trust kind of thing. So they are usually sub 100 person companies that start with us, and we grow them to 300 person companies. So SMBs are very aware of compliance because of sales. It's limiting their sales if they don't have a security and compliance program. So they're very invested. But once they spend, $100,000 a year on a vCISO, you're very focused on your people and processes, and your technology is very secondary.
I think that's spot on. Really do. I think that it's also industry specific and dependent. I think that's the separator is like, what industry are you in? But I do agree that like the data sharing and Privacy, I do. Yeah, that's a really good perspective because that does broaden
Right.
my answer. And that, yeah, you're right. There is
Yeah,
small and medium businesses do address
Yeah.
data security
Yeah.
via sales.
And we see a heavy number of healthcare adjacent companies. There's SaaS platforms serving healthcare providers, radiology departments, that kind of thing. They're serving some segment of the healthcare industry, and they have to contractually, they have to be HIPAA compliant. They go for high trust for, the fact that it does give them a boost up on sales. But it is very much, I'd say, 90%, 85, 90% of our prospects come to us looking for a compliance program. That remaining 9% is looking because their leadership or their investor group has said you will have a security and compliance program. And then that very tiny percentage is because they've had an incident or their cyber insurance has been canceled. But really that driving factor is the sales.
Good perspective.
So I'll go
Good
now.
perspective. Thank you very much, Carlota. I thank you for correcting me. Carlota Sage. All right, and that brings us to...
Hello, welcome to the Department of Yes, where no request is ever rejected.
All right. We had a lot of bad ideas, or really wrong things to say during an audit, but 2 were runaway winners here, which, by the way, I mean, they're all great.
They are.
By the way, I'm just going to say kudos to the audience right now. These are pretty spectacular. I mean, they're really funny.
Really good.
So we're calling out 2, but I'm not necessarily saying these are the 2 best, although they are pretty darn good. There are a lot of really good ones here. But again, you know how the game works. This is the Department of Yes. Whatever I say, you're going to do it, and you're going to explain why you're going to do it and why it's such a smart idea for you to do it. I'll start with you, Christina, on this one. And this one comes from Brian Colt. We just did this last year. What could have changed in that time? Why do you want to say that during an audit?
Because time is money, right? People don't want to have to do the same thing over and over because there's very little value in that when they could be spending their time focused on things that enable the business, that are increasing revenue, that are helping do more things, that are helping the business do more things. But if they're spending their time regurgitating the same data over and over, and they're typing it 3 different places, like it's just busy work at that point. So why couldn't we just use the data from last year?
Yes! Which, by the way, if you were out of compliance last year, you're saying also, I'm the same out of compliance as I was last year as this year. All right. Do you agree there, Heather, on that one? How would you handle this?
The same. My resources are precious. Maybe I have a few resources and we have other, larger fish to fry than going back and taking the same screenshots with different date and time stamps.
Bravo! Good job. All right. That was Brian Colt. By the way, we're going to bring you on right away. Aaron, get ready to bring Brian and Richard Yu, who did the other one here. Okay. Richard Yu's tip on what to say. We'll start with you, Heather. You guys know the drill. Use all of last year's evidences. Nothing's changed since you left. Similar to the other one, a little different tone. Why do you want to do this one?
The same thing. My resources are bogged down. And why would I ask them to log into that system just to get the same screenshot with the different date and time stamp? Use the same evidence and let them tell you it's wrong before you change it to save time and save our resources when the auditor comes. Save our readiness.
I like it. Oh, yeah! Christina, I throw it to you. Why are you doing this?
I mean, I would also say it's more of the same in the sense that I had already asked if the auditor could just log in and do it themselves, and they said no. So then my team's not going to do it. It's just a waste.
All right. Good job. Okay, can we bring Richard Yu on as well? Is Richard here? We got Brian Colt on, who, by the way, is wearing one of his jackets. He is a multi-time bad idea winner, by the way, winning this week as well.
I'm not sure if I want to brag about that.
Do we have Richard? Aaron, let me know. Is Richard going to be coming on? And I'm looking to the back channel. I'm prompting Richard. Richard, are you able to come on? Is Richard... I'm hoping he'll be able to come on in just a second. Let me ask you, Brian, since you had on, what is your top compliance concern these days?
Just the volume of requirements in a lot of the frameworks. I think somebody mentioned, how do you eat the elephant? There's
Yeah, that was Heather. Yeah.
especially like I'm currently working on ISO 27001, and it's overwhelming at times. So I think my biggest challenge is just picking what's most important and focusing on that, and doing iterative growth of our program.
Heather, I'm throwing this to you. How do you find out what's most important in ISO 27001?
You conduct a readiness, right? What do you look like now? What does that look like against ISO, and work backwards? It's really important to conduct a gap analysis when you're trying to pursue any kind of regulation, and ISO is no exception. You got to know where you are now to understand how to get where you're supposed to be going.
Do you do this, Christina, gap analysis?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's how you make sure that you're measuring your progress, right?
Exactly.
All right. It says accepting and connecting for Richard. Hopefully we're getting Richard on in just a second. But while we're waiting for Richard to come on, what are your thoughts on regular security training throughout the year for developers and all employees involved in all employees involved in the SDLC, so that when compliance comes around, the process is smoother? So do you think there's a one-to-one correlation here, Christina? This comes from NAFIS, by the way.
Are you finding that out in the industry that auditors are accepting policy as code? Because that's what I thought of when that question was asked. Is that something that's accepted now? Because I would love it if it is, because that certainly does shift left and make things better. And then you can enable monitoring to fix, cloud misconfigurations. And I'm speaking of the cloud when I say that, but that's where my brain went to was, yeah, sure. If we could do policy as a code, then all year round training would be great, because then you're strategic in the sense that you're addressing it, security and compliance from the start versus after the fact.
Policy is code. I'm dropping Brian. Okay. So Brian, unfortunately, you just got dropped because you're having problems with Richard. If we can get Richard on, we will do this. But get the 10% poll up, by the way. We have 18 minutes left in the show. By the way, good advice. This whole idea of policy as code, code as policy, I'm sorry, the other way around. Is that a possibility?
Yes? I just don't know if auditors are accepting it yet. That's what I didn't know.
Do they accept it? I don't know. I'm asking.
If
Heather,
we, I don't know. Well, a little bit, because if we say policy is code, is that the same thing as saying there are no exceptions to the policy?
No, it's basically saying that you're adding your compliance. Basically, you're defining your compliance from your security policies and your mandates, right? So you're combining the two, and then you're basically putting it into action. And I'm mostly talking about if you have an internally development shop, right? And you're in the cloud and you're building products, right? Then stick it in there, so that way you're not trying to do it at the end of the build cycle. And then that way you're saving time. And then if the auditors would accept it, you could pull a report that shows exceptions, right? Because there's all kinds of templates that you can use to show, hey, use ISO. Now let me see what my results are. So that's one of the other trouble areas I would say with the compliance industry, is that technology and the business moves much faster. And so then you're talking to auditors trying to say, well, here's this new thing and this does the same thing. And the auditor's kind of yeah, but my standard says this.
Right. So the scope of this audit was XYZ. You're now out of scope because you've introduced a new feature or whatever. Yeah.
We have, by the way, 10% poll is up and already getting lots of good votes. And I'm just going to call out, I don't know who did this, but I'm going to mention one of the tips. That's Brian Colt, who was just on seconds ago, has this tip. Meet with stakeholders regularly throughout the year to discuss the audit results, not just once or twice post-audit. This will help with the continual improvement and keep compliance in the stakeholders' minds. You are both nodding your heads. Have you actually done this, and what have you actually seen as a result, Christina?
When I was moving from PCI 3.0 to 3.1 at one organization, we had the auditor, we did quarterly, I think we did monthly for a while, just to get everybody, the internal teams ready for it. And then also to make sure that we were understanding the new regulation. And I felt like it was really helpful in the sense that we weren't over engineering things to address controls or address compliance mandates, because we were checking in, right? And so we were right sizing what we were doing to address the compliance mandate.
I think kind of the feel good, human part of me wants to say, well, the more you talk about it, the more they're going to be comfortable with it, and the likelier they are to comply or do what it takes to make sure the systems they're working on are in compliance or whatever the case may be, as opposed to coming in and knocking on their office door a couple times a year and saying, oh, hey, by the way, have you been doing XYZ all year? Because the auditor will be here next week. Mm-hmm. If it's something that you're constantly talking to them about and they understand the why behind what you're asking, they're going to be more receptive, all of these internal teams, because it takes a village to maintain compliance. It's not just the security team that's hosting the auditor, it's everyone else in the organization as well. So I think it's really important to discuss it as much as possible, just to keep it top of mind and help them understand this is why we're doing what we have to do.
By the way, Sean Bowen asked a question for which I believe you've already answered, Heather, but you can double down on this if you'd like. And
Sure.
We've heard this one before. If you were to pick one framework as the best, which is it? Sean Bowen, who's the CISO of World Fuel Services. I'm assuming ISO 27001 because it touches so many other things, yes?
I would say it's a really good foundation for technology-based organizations. I would say NIST CSF is a good complement. Mm-hmm. So, and NIST CSF is lighter weight than ISO. And so for budding organizations just looking to get started, I think CSF is a good one. And I think ISO is a nice one to mature into if it applies.
All right. By the way, I did a search on ISO 27001 and NIST CSF, and ISO 27001 did have more searches than NIST CSF, but not just the word NIST. NIST actually did fire. All right. What do you think, Christina?
I think I would agree, except for if you're in a small, just like what Heather said, if you're in a small and medium-sized business, I think NIST CSF has a better, it's easier to implement and it's easier to measure gaps, I think, because it's the scope is
Exactly.
more tailored to SMBs than ISO.
Yeah, exactly. It's easier to swallow. It's an easier pill to swallow. That's for sure.
Yeah, and they have templates and scorecards, and it's a good way. Yeah, it's just easier, I think, for SMBs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Agreed. By the way, we have about 13 minutes left. I want to remind everybody, if you have not clicked on the link at the bottom of the screen, please do that now, because that's going to change in about 7-8 minutes, because we are going to change it to our meetup portion of the show. And if you have never stuck around for that, it's a lot of fun. And I'll be there, and I believe Christina will be there, and Heather will be there. You know what I should do is should get one of those mirrors without the glass in it, like Romper Room, and I can say, if you remember Romper Room, I will do just that. So anyways, that link will change to that, but please click the link below, and you could be like Peter Zwers of Murado Intelligence, who won this week's raffle. People do actually win. My fault for not announcing them, and I'm now going to announce them from here on in. So please register for next week's as well. All right, because this is an easy time to do it too. Let's get to a few more questions I have here. I'm going to get one more question, then I'm going to call out some of the polls. Oh, where did the poll go? The 10% poll. I don't see it there anymore. Bring it back up, Aaron. What types of businesses do you think, because you see more than I'm going to guess than you do, Christina. But Heather, what types of businesses do you think struggle the most with compliance, and how are they managing? Like, how do they, let me say it this way, how do they manage differently? So the ones who dealing with the most severely versus other ones, and I'm assuming the more regulated industries, yes?
Sure. And I would take it a layer deeper than that. It's highly regulated organizations that are operating in some kind of distributed model, right? Maybe they have multiple product lines that all have to maintain their own ISO certification. Or perhaps we're talking about a holding company who has to maintain certain certifications across all of their subsidiaries. And all of their subsidiaries have their own niche. Some need to be PCI compliant and others don't. So the more layers and layers and layers that we add to the organizational hierarchy just makes GRC and compliance that much more complex. Mm-hmm. And how are they handling it? Very carefully. I would say technology is their best friend in this, single source of truth technology, where all of our evidence is, where all of our risk posture is, where all of our assessments are and our audits, et cetera, all live in one place. That's kind of the only, that's almost a pipe dream to some, perhaps, because that's such a tall order, especially for these really complex distributed organizations. but it's achievable. And I think the sooner you can implement technology alongside your program, the better off you may be.
I'm going to just share something with everybody because I think they all want to see it. This is the romper room image I was referring to earlier. There you go.
I think that's
And-
before my time.
And by the way, I imagine everybody that is behind this woman, that is the audience that's watching right now. That
That's
is the
great.
audience I'm assuming that is
That's
watching at
awesome.
this very moment. Good. Can I assume that's true? I am dating myself. Yes, I am that old, believe it or not. Yes, I am. All right, we have a little bit of time left. Let me get to you, Christina. Do you want to answer this question about businesses that struggle the most? I mean, let me start with this. How many different industries have you been in yourself?
I've actually been in a lot. I've been in 8 or 9 probably.
Oh, wow. So you
Yeah.
definitely can answer this question well. All right.
so
So
I
from
would
low to
say-
high, like what's been the most miserable to the least miserable?
I'd say different experiences. I in big company land, it's the amount of layers, like what Heather said, and the complexity, and then the scale. And then companies that are global, that adds that extra layer of complexity. And I think because now you're thinking about what are the country laws and regulations, and especially with privacy, that's a really good example of this, where you can be in a small SMB, and then basically, but you're subject to privacy. And if you're global, now you're thinking about, well, what is the laws here? Now, what are the laws here? And so it's just adding complexity. And then that's what I would say, is that basically the added complexity in small, medium-sized businesses when they're trying to do things that they're not usually used to doing. I think that's harder for them.
I want to call out one of these 10% tips, and I'm interested to know because Heather, you described what 6 Clicks does in terms of using the artificial intelligence to see how different compliance requirements are kind of crossing over each other to reduce a lot of the effort. And this comes from Matt Black, and he says, work to relate one department's compliance requirements to another department's. So slightly different than what you're doing. Help show how the different frameworks are related. Is there a way using your tool, or how can different departments kind of see how the compliance elements are affecting them specifically, or where they need to get involved?
So in 6 Clicks, we're a multi-tenanted platform, right? So you can have 500 subsidiaries that are all being managed autonomously of one another, but ultimately roll up to the parent or the corporate structure. It could be departments that roll up to the corporate hierarchy, right? So with this, it's bi-directional. So you can manage all of the corporate related compliance requirements at this top level and push all of those down to the various departments, and departments can fill in gaps from there. And vice versa, the departments roll up their data to the parent so that it's a landscape reporting opportunity, right? So that you're not just reporting on a department by department or subsidiary by subsidiary basis. You're reporting across the entire landscape, so you know where the problem children are, let's call it how we see it, and who's operating more efficiently or who can fill in these gaps, et cetera. So that's how we handle these types of complex distributed organizations with 6 Clicks, is through multi-tenancy.
What about you, Christina? How do you get the other departments involved and to see where they need to get involved?
Really what I do is I look at, you start with the leadership team of that individual department, right? And then I do the same approach, where it's basically you're doing the kickoff where they understand, so that way you have that support. I think a lot of times when you bring in people to tell them one department to another department, if you're not doing it from a top down perspective, at least one time, and it's really you're sending someone over to go talk to another department, a lot of times you're going to run into the same struggles with resources, with time, the so what factor, and so if you've done, I think the first step is that you get buy-in from the folks who can make sure that your program's successful. And then the second step is that then it can be peer-to-peer, but you have to make sure you have that backing.
Very good point. All right, let me do this. Let's wrap up. I'm going to just do our closing things for wrapping up. And then what I'm done with is I want from both of you just final thoughts on today's topic, and what you'd like kind of everybody to know, going forward, if you will, with compliance. So hold tight. Let me share this screen. All right. Reminder that next Friday is hacking third-party integrations, an hour of critical thinking about it, securing apps that talk to each other. If you have not clicked the button at the bottom of the screen, do it literally right this second, because it's going to change in seconds, because Aaron's going to change it. If you register by next Tuesday, you're automatically entered in a raffle to win a CISO Series jacket. And moments ago, Brian, I don't even know if Brian was wearing the old one or the new one. I can't remember, but we changed our logo, so you get the one with the new logo on it. All right. Oh, he has changed it. Yes. We'll get to that in a second. 6 clicks. Huge thanks to Heather and her company for sponsoring this Super Cyber Friday event. We love having you on as a brand new sponsor of CISO Series. So thank you so much for doing that. Guess what? You can find them at the6clicks.com. That's an easy way to find them. Hey, guess what? Starting in 90 minutes from now, we are going to be doing the Cybersecurity Headlines Weekend Review Show with Carla Sweeney, who's the VP of Information Security over at Red Ventures. She'll be the one offering the color commentary on the news. We'll have our reporter, Rich Straffolino, going over the week's news. You can join us there in just 90 minutes to do just that. Hey, guess what? Stick around for our meetup. Everyone right now, click the link at the bottom of the screen. Everyone is welcome. Everyone. You see, from students to CISOs and everyone in between, stick around the meetup. If you're all watching, you can go ahead and click it. The two of you don't click it now because it'll conflict with the video you're using. But when this ends, you can go ahead and click it. So everybody else, go ahead and click it now. I want to see all of you in there. All right. Whoops. Here we go. Tell your friends to join us. We do it every available Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. And you want to sponsor a CISO Super Cyber Friday? I think our next one's available. We got one at the end of August. Ping me. Let me know if you would like to do just that. All right. Now, we have just a few minutes left, and I'll ask both of you. I will start with you, Heather. A couple things. Last thoughts about compliance. If you're hiring, let us know if you're hiring as well. And any offer or any way to get in contact with you if they want to learn more about 6 clicks and what you guys can do with people who have compliance struggles.
Yeah. Last thoughts about compliance. Just do it. Just choose the easy framework and get started, because as long as you're moving and you're trying and you're reevaluating and you're doing this continuously, you're not wrong. Maybe you're not totally right, but at least you're on your way. So at the end of the day, just do it. Don't be resistant. You got to do it. So just do it. We are not hiring currently for any open positions here stateside, but if you're interested, we are growing like crazy. So please reach out to me at heather@6clicks.com. You can email me, and if we have a fit, in the near future, we'll chat about it. If you want to know more about 6 Clicks, you can go to 6clicks.com. We are a full-fledged GRC solution, again, with that multi-tenancy and artificial intelligence powering our solution. So if that's of interest to you, or if you'd like to understand more or go through the platform, I'd be happy to take you through. So you can go to 6clicks.com to request a demo, or feel free to email me directly at heather@6clicks.com.
That's easy. Christina, your final thoughts.
I would just
say, are you hiring, by the way?
So Catalina is hiring. I'm not hiring on my team, but Catalina is hiring.
Okay,
but
cool.
I would say the same. If you're interested in a role or security, or if you just want to talk, just want to bounce ideas, feel free to reach out, and I always help if I can.
All right. But your final thoughts on the compliance discussion we've been having today.
Compliance is challenging at times. It's complex, but it's also necessary. And just make it easier on yourself by staying up to date on the newest technology and things that are coming out that's making it easier. Like, you can go to the cloud today and pull a report and get all of your IAM controls and status of the controls, right? So look at things like that makes your life a little easier.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you very much. I want to thank both of you, Christina Shannon and Heather Bucher. Christina with CISO over Catalina USA, and Heather Bucher, CTO, global CTO. But you're both global, right? Global
Yes.
CISO, global CTO over at 6 Clicks. All right. We're wrapping this sucker up. Thank you so much. I want to thank you to our audience. Please, everybody, click on the link at the bottom. Join us over at the Toucan platform for our meetup portion. We'll run this for a half hour. Looking forward to chatting with all of you. That's it. Aaron, who's been our phenomenal producer, take us out.